Hello world! Welcome back to another HackerRank Python video. In this video, we're going to be solving the Arithmetic Operators challenge. Let's get started. Okay, our task. The provided code stub reads two integers from stdin. Stdin is just standard input, what the user's inputting, and standard. There's also stdout, which is just standard output, right? Like what's being displayed to the screen, right? Typically from like a print statement. And std error is, of course, standard error, which is just any kind of error thrown during code execution, right? Add code to print 3 lines where 1, the first line contains the sum of the two numbers. 2, the second line contains the difference of the two numbers, first minus second. And 3, the third line contains the product of the product of the two numbers. They have an example, a equals 3, b equals 5, print the following. Of course, 3 plus 5 is 8, 3 minus 5 is negative 2, and 3 times 5 is 15. Our input format should be the first line contains the first integer a, the second line contains the second integer b, and they gave that, of course, if you look over here, they gave that to us. And here are our constraints. So these constraints, I think I mentioned them in the intro video, they are basically there to get you to start thinking about when you write code, whenever you're inputting a value, you don't always want the user to be able to input, certain things as opposed to others, right? So if let's say, I have a script that makes you guess the number, guess a number from 1 to 10, right? Well, you don't want the user to be able to input like a letter, right? Or a negative number, right? So you would want some kind of condition after the, input or the prompt for inputting, right? You would want some kind of conditional after the inputs to kind of verify that the input is valid, what you want it to be, okay? And there's, plenty of ways you can go about doing that. In this one, we're going to make it very easy, right? So our constraints are A has to be greater than or equal to 1, but less than or equal 10 to the 10th power. And B, same thing, right? Same condition as A. So what we're going to do is, and now we want it so that, whenever you input something that is just invalid, we do want the script, right? We do want the script to give us a detailed error or statement that tells us, oh, hey, A is out of bounds or A is not proper input, right? We want to know exactly, we want the error to be able to tell us exactly what's wrong so that we can go fix it in our script, right? Because if the error is just vague, right? Like if I was comparing both A and, well, let's get into it and I'll explain it a little bit more in detail afterwards, right? So for our constraints here, we want to write a couple of if conditions, right? We want to say if A is less than, or actually we can do if A in range of 1 to the 10 to the 10th power, right? Now, there's one thing I'd like to point out with this, is that this will get actually 1 less than 10 to the 10th power, but we want A is less than or equal to, because remember in our in range statement, right, which we've seen before in my actual, Python series, right? We want to always make sure that our one after whatever our upper bounds is, right? Because it's always going to be, the index is always going to end 1 before. Now our starting index is fine. That's good as is. It's going to start at what we set it to. Now, I could go ahead and say, and B in range, blah, 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 right? But we don't want to do that because if we print out an error, if A or B fails, we're not going to know which one failed. Now, this is very simple, so we can analyze the output and easily determine which one failed, right? But when you get into more complex coding, right, you're going to want to know which, your variables failed. So we're actually going to split up our constraint checks, right? So we're going to go ahead and say print A must be, oh, forgot quotes. A must be inclusively between 1 and 10 to the 10th power. Okay? And then we're just going to do a simple exit, right? And a simple little exit statement, you know, because we don't want our code to keep executing. Now we're going to have a separate conditional for our B, and we can basically just, we can just basically copy and paste what we did here and just replace A with B. Okay? So now if our A or B fail, we'll know exactly which one failed and why, right? Because obviously we need a number. Let's go ahead and specify a number value that is inclusively between, must be a number value, because you know, somebody could be like, oh, what's a number, you know, what's a string? We want to make a distinction that it's a number value, not like a string value or something, right? So now that our constraints are taken care of, right? Now, depending on, you know, in another world or another scenario, right, we could have easily had just made, like, take our previous example I mentioned before where we're guessing from 1 to 10, right? Instead of this 10 to the 10th power plus 1, we would actually have, you know, be in range of 1 to 11, right? Because it's going to be 1, it's going to go from 1 to the index before its second, you know, parameter inside the parentheses, right? So then we would have an error output that says it needs to be inclusively between 1 and 10 in that case. Okay, enough of the constraint talk. You know, we're going to go over several, you know, several of these challenges have constraints in them, so you'll get familiar with how you need to think about these, right? Even though they do tell you what the constraints are there. And let's actually, you know, get into solving this, right? So our actual task, if we go back up here, is we need to print these 3 lines out, right? We need our first line to contain the sum of the 2 numbers. Very simple, right? A plus B. Boom. We could assign a variable, right? We could assign C equals A plus B and print it out that way, but we want to optimize our code. Every single character in your code, right, aside from comments, right, those are different. Every single character in your code represents a byte of data that your CPU has to process. So the more bytes you have, you know, the longer it's going to take for it to process and interpret your code. Now, this is negligible, right? It's going to be very small, negligibly different in execution, but it's good to practice code optimization. Now, that way, further down the line, you'll know, oh, I can write this out this way to make it a lot faster because I can take out this piece or whatever, right? So let's move on to the second task. It's basically just A minus B in this case, right? And then our third cast is, of course, the product, A times B. And that's it. One thing I want to point out that wasn't in the previous challenge is this if name equals main. You can look at that as kind of like, if you've ever done like C++ or any other language with functions, right? It's usually like there's like a main function, right, that executes. And that's kind of what this is. You could literally take this piece out if you wanted to. Whoops. But we'll just leave it in there, right? Because it, you know, it'll segment out what our main executing part of the code is. But of course, again, we don't technically need that for our script. It won't make a difference. And in another IDE, it still won't make a difference. You don't have to have it in there if you don't want to. Anyways, so let's go ahead and run our code and see if we did this right. Ooh, we got a wrong answer. And here's why. When I wrote these conditionals, I accidentally forgot to say, we actually don't want to test if, you know, A and B are in range of those, right? We want to test and see if A and B are not in range, right? So we can, you might think, oh, well, we could throw a not out to the side here, right? Well, yes, but it's better if we just, you know, these are membership operations, right? In and not in our membership operations. So there's always a reverse, right? There's always an opposing, you know, operator to the original, right? You know, you got less than, greater than, you got, okay, add, subtract, you got whatever, right? Is, not is. In here, we can just do not in and not in, all right? Now, we can run our code again, and we should get the proper output this time. Congratulations. When it looks like it only gave us one test case because this is just a very simple challenge, right? So we'll go ahead and submit our code. And so when you're submitting the code, it actually does more than one test case. So I guess when you're running the code, maybe it only has one. It's hard for me to remember. It's been a while since I've dabbled with this platform, so bear with me. So we can see our test case 0. Input is 3 and 2. And we should get 3 plus 2 is 5, right? 3 minus 2 is 1, right? 3 times 2 is 6. Now, in the later challenges, I'm not going to go through all the test cases and outputs, but we will go through these because they do. Oh, you have to unlock this test case for 5 hackos. I forgot about that. Okay, so you can get hackos. As these hackos are things that you get as you solve more and more challenges, right? You get hackos based on how many challenges you solve. We're not going to unlock it because we want to save our hackos for, a harder challenge. But just know that whatever this was, we did pass it. So that'll be it for this video. Please drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. Check out and join our Discord channel in the description down below. And check out these other videos that should pop up on the screen here sometime towards the end of the video. Maybe right now. And we will see you in the next video. This is Almond Milk signing out.